other than, there's a lot of kind of intuition, but not a lot of data behind it. So I think that the idea is that would all help support running the plant more efficiently to generate savings at a lot more of a modest cost saving. And also the meters, I think, would be recommended under any option. So even if we went with one of the GHD options, this knowing where your waste is going would be fundamental to them as well. So that was the case behind why we think where we think we can spend money and get a good benefit from it. In terms of the I&I works, which is inflow and infiltration, so essentially stormwater or either flowing in through via the surface or infiltrating through underground into the wastewater network, is seen as another challenge for the system, and that can put pressure on the plant downstream. So we put a lot of loggers out in the system to measure flows, not just as it comes into the plant, but throughout the network. And we were fortunate to get a really big storm as well straight after that. So the May and June floods happened a little bit after we had the meters go in, and that allowed us to see where the inflow was coming into the system. That provided pretty useful data, but it didn't present us with any opportunities to make really significant savings, as in investing a modest amount of money and getting a big gain. It was more just incremental improvements. As well as that work, we also did some property inspections, which again offered some kind of not drastic problems, but a reasonably large number of small issues of that could be addressed through one-on-one work with property owners, but again, it would be incremental differences that would make rather than wholesale changes. So there is a little bit more work to do in the network, but not work that would, no big chunk of work that would make a drastic difference. So it's hard to identify a particular project to do there. It's probably more of an ongoing investigation. And then further to that, the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly before taking questions was the master plan work. So we also are conscious that we've got a resource consent for discharging waste from the Oxford Wastewater Treatment Plant coming up for renewal in 2031. And with changes that are happening, we expect that gaining a new consent will be more challenging, will have more challenging conditions to currently. So we wanted to get an idea of what kind of changes might we make at the plant to meet that future new consent conditions as well, and start planning for that now. Partly because it's good to plan it out and know what we've got coming and include that in the next long-term plan, but also that we don't want to make any changes at the plant now that might be superseded or become redundant if we with a whole different type of treatment system. So the master plan work is still preliminary in nature. It's I've attached a draft report for information, but we've given quite a lot of feedback to the consultant so far, and we haven't got a final version of the report yet. So it's more just for information at this stage on how that project is progressing, rather than being in a position to make recommendations or suggest particular solutions. But we intend, after the conclusion of that report, to bring a comprehensive finished report and recommend options for the longer term strategy for the treatment plant. But I think the only thing that is important to consider now is that the types of things that are suggested there are still the work we're proposing to do to reduce the operational costs, which will have a benefit in the short term as well as long term, will still be relevant for the longer term options as well of adding in new treatment processes, so that money won't become wasted expenditure, and it will start saving money sooner than that 10-year horizon as well. So happy to take any questions on that.
Thanks, Colin. Caroline, or do you want to add anything? All right. So I've got a question from Councillor Doody, followed by Councillor Meanings and Councillor Stewart.
Right. We right?
Yep.
I've unmuted. Yep. Colin, just a query, please. Can you explain how that inflow system is going to work once you've located where the excess water is coming from? Can you just give us it's a little bit past my technical knowledge.
Yeah, so part of that is we, and this was something I didn't talk about, is that we also looked at some benchmark levels from Water New Zealand, or kind of threshold levels on what is a normal level of inflow and infiltration for a wastewater scheme, and where's the kind of threshold where you should, where you're beyond an acceptable level, and you should be able to find areas to improve. And in general, Oxford was kind of on the cusp of the border of the upper limit of acceptable versus the threshold for doing more. So it's kind of also telling us that actually the scheme isn't performing horrendously, and in fact, when we compared it to Kaiapoi, it performs better than Kaiapoi, for example, because so that alongside the other work we did with the loggers and the private property inspections, it's almost just telling us that there is limited opportunities to really cut that back drastically. So it's more that we should monitor it closely, and if we continue gathering this data, we might see it as it gets worse and be able to target a solution. But ultimately, there doesn't appear to be particular isolated spots where there's just water gushing into the system that's overloading the plant that we could patch up and make a big dent in. I think it's going to be more through targeting relining and renewals sort of gradually over time that will keep it within an acceptable level, or bring it down gradually. But it's it's not, there's not one easy project we can just say, oh, if we spend $50,000 here, we'll have 20% less flow at the plant or anything like that. It's just going to be I think the loggers and things we've got out will just help us target future renewals and that kind of thing.
Just my next question I want to ask, please, is that where those air vents just down our drive, when it rains, it covers right over those air vents. So would that be creating water problems?
Yes, that's the kind. Yep, that's exactly the kind of thing we are looking at through the private property inspection. So there was, I can't remember the number, but something like 100 properties had gully traps. I think under the building code are meant to have 100 millimeters of sort of riser around them, so that if the flooding around a house would need to be more than 100 millimeters deep to get into the sewer system. And we've overlaid, or we targeted those inspections with our flood model to try to look at where there is flooding. So we're going to go through that with our wastewater engineer and send letters to people with things like what you've got. So hopefully we picked you up in our survey. I'm not sure if anyone came onto your property to do an inspection, but people, with that kind of thing where there's no riser around the gully trap, will and they're in an area that could have some flooding, we'll intend to send a letter to ask them to put a riser on it, which is quite a basic little job, but each one of them will make a small improvement to the to what's coming to the treatment plant.
Thank you. I think you probably need to come and have a look.
Okay.
What I'm talking about. Thanks.
Yep.
And just further to Colin's response, Councillor Doody, just for your information, there are a number of stormwater projects that are looking at addressing some of that flooding. So upstream of Tawera Lane, there's the York Street diversion works, which will actually look at cutting off some of that catchment. And we've also got investigations underway in the Burnett Street area and High Street area of Oxford. So that's actually looking at improving the drainage system such that there's less flooding that is going to inundate the wastewater system.
Okay, I've got Councillor Mealings.
Hi guys. Hey, great report. There's an awful lot of information in there and it's quite thorough, but I just probably further to what Councillor Doodie's just asked, just could you help me understand, like, if the I&I level in Oxford due to rainfall is so much lower than, say, Kaiapoi and is at the normal threshold values for typical New Zealand wastewater systems, then why is it that during the last flood event back in May that Oxford had to restrict water use due to excess water in the ponds during that event and Kaiapoi didn't? I don't really sort of get the connection between not having as much rainfall and then this rainfall event causing the wastewater treatment to have a bit of a crisis there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, I might not have explained it very well. It's not that Oxford is right on the good level of I&I, it's at the cusp of the complete upper limit of good versus, so it's sort of at the threshold between whether you'd call it the upper limit of acceptable or the lower limit of unacceptable. So it does have I&I problems. It's just that they're not they're not so bad that there's these really easy things that can be solved. It's more this there's probably like 1,000 little weak joints that have that allow a little bit of groundwater to seep in rather than something that can easily be solved. So it's not a really good system, but it's not a really poor system as well. And I think one of the things with the treatment plant is we're constrained a little bit by, and Caroline might be able to help me with this question, but we could pump more water through the treatment process during a flood, but that risks washing out and making the treatment system worse. So the pumps have been set to a certain limit, and then what they can't pump away goes into the holding pond, and if the inflow into the plant minus what's pumped through the treatment system exceeds what the pond can handle, the pond is at risk of overflowing. So it's probably relevant from a couple of points of view. That was a really extreme event. I think for the catchment it was in the order of 1 in 50 year or 100 year type thing, so it's not a normal event.
I realized that was quite a huge rainfall event, but is it just because the capacity at the Oxford wastewater treatment plant is so much smaller than that at Kaiapoi that it caused that effect?
Maybe I can add to that. So Oxford's got a mechanical treatment plant, whereas the rest of the district, like in the Eastern District, we've got pond systems. So basically that's just a better buffer for any fluctuations in flow. So Oxford, being a mechanical plant, is quite compact and it's very sensitive to flow fluctuations. So we have got the holding tank that will buffer storm flows up to a certain capacity, but beyond that, then we will have issues with the treatment plant functioning well. So that's different in that aspect.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I sent a question through to Kelly this morning, and I apologise, Colin, and Caroline, I didn't actually think of sending it to you, but it concerns going forward in the future. And I note in the report from one of the consultants, I don't know which one it is, but that the current plant produces an effluent with a nitrogen loading rate of 140 kg per hectare per year, which is within the current consent, which is 200 kilograms per hectare per year. But in fact, my question concerns the NPS fresh water, which gave a limit for inputs onto ground for irrigation or fertilizer, which effectively this is doing, to the of 120 kg per hectare per year as a maximum under the NPS last year, and none of this is referred to by the consultants when it's talking about planning for the plant going forward. So there's that question, which is where is the requirements that it will be across all discharges to meet the NPS. And the other thing is when they do the calculations to show what, after you've sprayed this out onto the land, there's a calculation there, which I don't know how they get it, but it's how much is used up by the pasture and how much actually goes to the root zone. And the question is, what mechanism, what formula are they using for calculating this? If they're using overseer, which they may be, as everybody is doing in the regulatory space, and it is now seen to be not fit for purpose.
So your question is, Councillor Stewart?
Well, there's two of them. What are they using, and how good is this report going forward when in fact it talks about proposed stuff for PC7, which is past being proposed. We will have to revisit all this when we get the thing out. So what are the parameters here, and how robust is this plant going to be when you overlay the NPS freshwater requirements?
Yeah, I think those are all very good points that you've raised. I presume you got as far through the GHD report as Appendix B, which sets out how they've come up with what they think a future nitrate limit would be. But I can see it hasn't addressed every point you've made just now. So I think we will have to just, it's really good to get that feedback, especially when the report is still in draft state, and just work through that with them a little bit more to make sure we've covered all that off.
We are
I think
hampered.
Sorry, carry on.
We are hampered in that while ECAN has got the decision on PC7, it hasn't actually been released to the public. So they are in the dark somewhat. So they've worked from the proposed limits that were in the draft plan change, and that's going to be superseded in a matter of weeks, perhaps, by what comes out when ECAN looks at the overseer constraints and therefore the validity of the decisions from the commissioners.
So you're getting into a debating point here.
No. I'm just asking the question about, is this in the mix here? And so what value is this report when the whole environment has already changed, which isn't mentioned in this, and will continue to change?
Sandra, I need you to confine it to a question, because we'll be here all afternoon.
That is the question.
Okay, so Colin.
Yeah, so I think the short answer is that we will make sure as much information as is available to the consultant is taken into account in the final report. And it's also worth noting that it's the consent doesn't require renewal for 10 years, so we need to, but we should be setting aside a budget now, which we'll do. And if we need to tweak exactly what that solution is, as we get more clarity, we'll have time to adjust that before we come to constructing something as well. But so I think we will be able to consider as much as possible and make sure none of those points you've raised are missed. But also we won't be rushing into building something that'll become redundant either, because there'll be a bit of time before we start construction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Sandra. Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Colin. I see that sludge is a byproduct of the whole process and very important. On page 50 and 51, you refer to the Henley sludge age controller. Is the purchase of that still on the table? It seems like an opportunity we shouldn't miss.
Yes, we need to kick off conversations with City Council again, which our previous wastewater manager had started. But yeah, that's one thing we thought, is that the operational changes alone could provide the best outcome, because although that unit, it had been discussed us buying it for a nominal $1, it would still cost a bit of money to install and get operational, and it was also suggested to do some pilot trials before committing to it. So what we could do is, in parallel with the operational improvements, then look at picking up those conversations with the City Council again, and probably doing some kind of condition assessment of it. And it might be that we could, if we thought it was an opportunity we might miss, then we could buy it almost as a backup, because it, or we could, we wouldn't have to start using it straight away if we could buy it and store it somewhere, or we might, we might not need it if the operational improvements work really well. The MPV has shown that actually they could provide the best solution without that. So it is something that we can continue to explore with or without the other changes we're proposing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blackie.
Thank you. Yes, I support Councillor Redmond's thing about this machine, although when I read it as a Henley sludge age controller, I was a bit worried it was a device to get rid of old age pensioners. But for a $1, by all means, grab it and have it up our sleeve. My question is, the options down the track, one of them conveyancing the lot to Rangiora. Can you explain to me the difference? He says the gravity main could be installed with manholes every 120 metres. Why do we need those every 120 metres? And then it says, or combine it with a pressure falling main, which uses the natural hydraulic grade as the driving force. So what's the difference between a pressure falling main using the grade as the force and an ordinary gravity main?
There's very little difference, really. I think usually gravity mains have a manhole every 130 metres, and that's what our code of practice says they should have. And that's because in a conventional gravity system, you've got houses connecting, all along it, and you could get blockages, and you need manholes to get in and inspect and clear blockages. So I think it was more just them saying, well, we could have designed it by your code of practice, but in this case, it doesn't make sense because it's just a big, giant, long pipe that has, basically no connections along the route. So I think that was their logic in just justifying why they hadn't allowed for that many manholes, which would have made the cost even higher. Caroline can chip in if I've got that wrong, but I think that's all it was. And it was just really quite a broad exercise just to demonstrate it had been looked at and check whether it stacked up at all against treatment improvements, because we thought if we start proposing spending a few $1 million at Oxford, the question will get asked, well, hang on a minute, why don't we just pipe it all to Rangiora like all their other schemes? So we wanted to make sure we'd at least looked at it, but even with that kind of lower cost design, it still didn't look like it would stack up.
Okay, I have Councillor Atkinson followed by Councillor Ward. Neville, did you want to still ask a question? Yep. You're back on mute.
Excuse me. Just around that exact point, where in the dollar scheme does it become that we need to, I'll use the word scrap this plant, that's not exactly what I mean, but downgrade this plant and actually get it into the eastern districts? Where is that point? We're spending a lot of money here. We've spent a lot of money in the past. There is clearly going to be upgrades that are going to come, and under the new three waters, they could be quite extensive. Where is the point where we actually do come to Rangiora with the pipeline? Where's the investigation? I realise you've done a basic one, but where's the investigation and the price point that we do that? I think
that essentially, I think our thoughts were this is enough to justify not doing it. $20 million versus $3 million is a huge difference, and it still doesn't take into account the that all that waste would then have to flow through the Rangiora system. So there would have to be some, there'd be some knock-on effects there where it would consume capacity within Rangiora. Then it's got to flow through the Rangiora plant onto Kaiapoi and consume capacity there. So there's more costs or indirect costs in terms of consuming capacity beyond that 20 million as well. So I don't think there is a case, even if our $3 million in the future became 5 or 6 because we want to achieve better environmental outcomes or something. I don't think it's going to get anywhere near becoming a viable option based on the high level analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. I'm just, if you can help me, why would we pipe and lose all that excess water out to sea when we can recycle it in a sustainable way and retain it with the locally into what might be a drought area and be able to keep the moisture in the ground? I really don't see the point in sending it all out to sea.
Yeah, I think Jared was going to answer that.
Jared, you're on mute. Yep.
So I'm just having trouble finding my button with my mouse. Okay, look, that's a good question to ask, and it is something that does come up as a general question, and And it's good that you've raised it specifically in this instance, because we do have a plant here that's quite a long way away from the sea. But in countries where there is a lot more scarcity of water than we have in Waimakariri, that's exactly what they do. It's even done in the North Island to some extent. Hamilton discharges its wastewater into the Waikato River, and then Auckland picks it up further on down the river, treats it and drinks it. So that happens all over the world. And there's certainly a lot of consideration now to trying to reduce the water consumption and the amount of water that you're disposing of and treating as a waste in all sorts of areas. So the very easiest level is making sure you try and retain the stormwater, for example, as a starting point. We are very fortunate where we are in Waimakariri that we've actually got an abundance compared to other areas of good potable groundwater that doesn't actually require any treatment. So while and I don't know the exact figures, probably Kelly would know these better than me, but the actual proportion of the water that is used in our district is something in the order of, I think it's either 1 or 4% for of all of the water. So most of the water is actually used for agriculture, for irrigation, and it's very expensive to treat wastewater to a point where you can use it to drink and then put it back into the potable system. So in our context, we're a very long way away from anything that would stack up in terms of full recycling. At least at Oxford, we do actually use the wastewater for land disposal, and that presents challenges because of the issues that Councillor Stewart is talking about in terms of having an impact on water quality. But yeah, really good point. We're quite a long way away from that being a realistic option for our district, but over time, that question will probably continue to be asked, and you'll see more and more being adopted in other places as well.
Well, thank you for that. I had a look with Councillor Williams down at
no, it's a debating point unless it's a question, Councillor Ward. Is it a question?
No,
you raise it in debate.
Later. Yes,
yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doody, did you have another question? And then followed by Councillor Williams. Yeah.
Thank you. Just would like to, a little bit concerned about perhaps what the figures and that might escalate to what this service is going to cost the ratepayer. And I just would like our staff, if they would please consider at some stage, just to keep our ratepayers up to date on what's going on and what's happening, because this could be quite a shock to them if it gets out of hand a bit. So, and especially with at the moment with what you're going to be doing with our stimulus funding, it would be very helpful for them to understand the reason behind it. Your thoughts, Colin?
Yes, yeah, definitely. We can do some comms around the outcome of the project when we're finished, to say this, we allocate this money and this is what we've achieved with it, and hopefully have some positive outcomes from the trials in terms of the optimizing the operational costs. So I think that'll be some good news, and then it'll also be come with a little bit of what might be seen as bad news, that coming up at the end of the decade we're going to have to spend some more money on the consent as well. But yeah, so but definitely we will do some comms when this all concludes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if there's no other...
just hold on, this Councillor Ward, but you're sorry, not Councillor Ward, Councillor Williams, you're indicating you wish to move, is that right? Yep. Sorry. Well, Councillor Doody is indicating she wants to move. You wish to second, Councillor Williams, is that right? Did you have a question as well, Councillor Williams? No. So is there any other questions? So we'll come to the recommendation. Councillor Doody's moving, seconded by Councillor Williams. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Doody?
no, thanks. I'd just like to say thank you very much for the report. It's a very good report, and it's helping us to understand just what this wastewater treatment plant is achieving and what we need to be doing in the future. So thank you very much, Colin and Kelly, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Yes, no, thanks, Colin and Caroline and Kelly. Yeah, very good report. I can see it makes sense to do this. It's a short-term and long-term savings, so and it's something that's going to have to be done anyway. So it's actually good because it'll eventually start helping and reducing the cost for the Oxford residents. So it's pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you. Just colleagues, if you can use the reaction button, Councillor Doody, if you just unraise your hand now. But I noticed some of you were doing it. What it does, and even during speaking time, it just lets me know, and then it pops you up to the top of the screen. So if you can use the raise hand function, and after you finish speaking or answer your question, take it down. It just assists me with knowing that I've got you there for speaking. Or wave your hand, but if you could use that function, it'd be helpful. Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Certainly support this work that's outlined here. What I did find astonishing was the inflow from groundwater when the plant was not under stress from any rain. It has a huge amount of groundwater that's getting into the system, which I find absolutely extraordinary. But what I'm concerned about, as I indicated earlier, is that going forward with this plant, I do take on board what Councillor Atkinson said, that we keep front and centre the comparison with joining up to a larger plant somewhere in the forefront of our minds, because I'm very well aware of what happened to Summerhill Water Supply when we went pretty much alone for a long time, and then suddenly and there was a proliferation of private wells all around the district where subdivisions were happening. And lo and behold, it turned out that it now, only a few years later, it would have been much more cost efficient and also more, taking the well-being of our population into account, that they had all joined together. So I would like to see that is kept to the forefront of all considerations with this plant, which to my mind still remains pretty much a dog. But what is coming in the 10 years when will be increased standards through NPSs and plan changes that we don't seem to actually have in the draft reports that are there. And I'm really well aware that this discharge will be considered just like a fertilizer, a dairy farm fertilizing ground, which effectively it does do. And it's already exceeding the cap that's been put on by the government at this point. It doesn't need to worry about it because it's got a consent up to 2031. But that's not going to go, it's going to go downwards in that 10 years. And I would like to be assured that exactly what it's going to cost to keep us within limits that are going to be outlined by plan changes and national policy statements. But in the interim, I'm relatively comfortable with what's proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to support the recommendations. This has been a long-standing issue in Oxford. I remember when I was a councillor out there myself when it was raised, and certainly some of the early public meetings I attended where the community were promised all sorts of things that would have happened with this treatment plant. I think Councillor Stewart's apt in her terminology of what the system actually is. We've spent a lot of money patching it over the years. This is just another part of that exercise. So it is something we need to keep an eye on. I agree with Councillor Doody. We do need to keep our community informed out there, because it's something they well understand, given what they were promised to what they were delivered. So it precedes all of us, this particular plant, but it's our responsibility. So this is another part of that journey to making sure that it's delivering what it should be delivering. So I'm going to support the recommendation. I agree with other comments. I think the staff have done an excellent job on their summaries. Any further speakers? Right of reply, Councillor Doody. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Just raise your hands. Yep, good. That's well and truly against. That's carried. Thanks, Colin, Caroline, Kelly, and Jared. So we come to next is there was to be an adverse weather event recovery report. That's not going to happen today, and in fact, that won't be happening on our agendas going forward. Thanks, Caroline. But there will be an update that comes by way of report to our next meeting of council, and it wasn't ready for today, so that's why it didn't come here. So on that, we do come to 7.2 though. So it's a flood event emergency work update, and that's a report in the name of Jared. Is Jared still? Yes, you are. Sorry, Jared.
Yes, thank you. Look, and I've also got Kelly and Colin and Joanne, hopefully, here to just help with any questions that come out.
I see Simon's joined. I see Simon's joined in here too.
And Simon as well. Great. So look, you will recall we brought a report to you in July, and effectively in July, we were asking permission in somewhat retrospective manner to spend $3.5 million. And we actually went to a fair level of detail in that report describing the extent of the damage from the flood and where that was going. So we've had the opportunity now to finish a lot of that work and to have a much closer look at whether we can manage it within existing budgets, whether there's any other funding sources, including co-funding from Waka Kotahi, any possibilities of insurance, and just having, generally having a much better understanding. So this report actually, that 3.5 million has now been reduced to 2.82 million as a request, and we've also got a much more clear definition of exactly which areas we need to take that from, which budgets. And so this is actually asking for your approval for those budgets that are listed in recommendation B, and specifically they're road and green spaces and property. So we don't actually request any additional budget for the three waters as a result of the work that we've been doing. It is probably also just worth commenting that this is really about the response and recovery from the flood event. As with any of any event like this, we identify areas around the district where we've got issues, and they often only come to light in events like this. And so this report doesn't cover everything that may come in the future as a result of those issues being identified. So sometimes they were known issues to us, and this has just once again reminded us that we've got some kind of a deficiency in our infrastructure or our roading network, and there have been some that have actually come to light here, but we're not asking for any money for those, and we still have a whole series of service requests we're working through. So some of those may eventually come up as either a report to utilities and roading, as investigations are carried out, or and possibly eventually in future bids in annual plans and the long-term plan. So that's just sort of a bit of an overview for me. I don't think I need to talk very much to the report. I think you're probably familiar with most of it, and just happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got firstly Councillor Williams, followed by Councillor Barnett. Thanks, Jared.
Yep, thanks, Jared. This report, is it possible to get an added on to it so we actually know the actual total cost of the that flood cost of the region? You know, the water and wastewater and drainage costs. I know they're coming out of existing budgets, but it'd be quite interesting to find out what the actual total cost that flood cost the region.
Yes, that is possible. Yep. So not right now, but we could circulate a memo to councillors with an updated table with our best estimate of that figure. Yes, happy to do that.
Perhaps that could come in Simon's coming report. That's to do an overall on the recovery. Maybe Simon, you could include a table in there with the total cost if you could. Thank you. Is that okay with you, Councillor Williams? Councillor Barnett?
So just to clarify, we've basically received no government funding to assist us with the Lees Valley road damages at this stage. Could you clarify that?
I'll clarify it, and if Joanne needs to add anything. We have received, well, we're expecting to get the Waka Kotahi funding. So the figure that we've got in there, if we don't get that, we'll let you know, but I'll be extremely surprised if we don't get that. If that's does that answer your question?
Partially, but there was no additional except for the general normal subsidy that we received from Waka Kotahi. Is that correct? No additional funding from government.
That is correct. That is correct. Although it is unbudgeted from their perspective as well. So it is additional over their funding that we had budgeted, but it is at the same level, I suppose. And we're not aware of any other funding source from a separate government entity or anything.
Thanks for clarifying that, Jared, just making sure we can get money from all sources. The last question I've got slightly operational, so Joanne might be able to answer this one. When are the forwards going to be opening? Because I noticed that rural residents are ignoring the closed signs because the forwards are at such a low level in several areas, particularly the Earleys Road, Downs Road one.
So just to provide a clarification on the funding, so we get the NZTA 51% funding rate for the 10% above our normal maintenance operations renewals budget, which does mean that there is a small portion of the emergency works claim which we are likely to get 71% funding assistance rate on. So we are just working through that with NZTA at the moment, but there will be hopefully a little bit that we can get an enhanced VAR on. In terms of the forwards, so we've just been working with ECAN on the forwards on the Eyre River, and we've had I guess some issues with those because of the amount of sediment that's been dropped into the rivers at each of the forwards. So we have kept the forwards closed until previously because the river levels have just been a bit high, but in acknowledging they are dropping now. ECAN have been working down the river, moving the material within the riverbed, and we've been working with them to try and tie in the forwards as we go through. So that is something we will be looking to try and get them open within the next few weeks.
So how will that be communicated to residents? Because obviously some forwards are used more than others and are actually almost major routes in the rural sense, particularly like the ones closer to the eastern side of the district.
Yep, I think we keep a list of forwards that are closed and open on our website, so I can certainly get that updated and can work with the comms team when we are opening them to get that message out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just if we refer to pages 188 and 189 of the agenda, it's got in here the total costs, notwithstanding the question Councillor Williams raised, but assuming we get recovery, then the actual cost to the district's 1.2 million. Am I reading that table correctly, Jared?
Yeah, yes, although that doesn't necessarily include all the costs that Councillor Williams is looking for.
So that's why I said notwithstanding his, so it's about 1 point, notwithstanding that, but the cost to the district's 1.2. Yeah, okay. Or assuming we get all the other funding in place. Any other questions? Okay, so we've got a recommendation. Someone prepared to move? Moved by Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Barnett. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Ward?
Just to say that well done, tremendous effort to get everything repaired in a timely fashion, and it was huge effort, and the report was very detailed. It was really good, and I just think that the team have done an amazing job of getting everything back up and running and secure as quick as they can. So well done, everybody.
Councillor Barnett?
Yes, just to emphasise that also, I thought the recovery effort was very, very good in a very extreme rainfall event. And people did feel well supported. There was good communication going forward. I think now, though, we don't want to drop the ball and not look at things that we can do to improve going forward. And the recovery on a rural perspective has been a little bit slow with some of the issues such as roading, forwards and so on. And there's been little communication back to residents when some of those issues may not be seen by the city dwellers, but are quite important out here in the country. So I just would like to see perhaps a little bit of up to communications about what our plans are now as we're recovering, and also then perhaps really looking forward to that debrief when we can actually talk about how we can stop some of these things happening in the future, some of the minor issues that rear up every single time we have a rain event.
Thank you. I've got Councillor, was it Williams, I think? Yeah. And followed by Councillor Doody, who I've lost on the screen. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Barnett just sort of raised a wee bit point, and my point was we were going to have a debrief on this storm event, and we actually haven't had this proper debrief yet. So I'm just wondering when that's been penciled in.
It's a good question. Jared, I'm wondering if you could take that one up. It should have been scheduled, a debrief on this particular event, because I have asked for that to be done. So I'm wondering if, Jared, you wouldn't mind taking the lead on that and making sure it's included in one of our briefings at some point.
Yes, yeah, that's no problem at all.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Doody, did you wish to say anything?
Yes, please. I'd just like to say thank you very much to the staff for all the work they've done, particularly the amount of work that was done up in Lees Valley. Gratefully appreciated. That was a mammoth job to do, and to be able to have that road working again now is wonderful for the community that uses it. So thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers? Just totally endorse the comments that have been made. An outstanding effort by our staff, and particularly the response into Lees Valley. That was a huge challenge in there. I'm just wondering, Jared, just timing of that debrief, if we could have it probably before we discuss Simon's report. So even if we timed it, even if we took a time slot of midday before the next council meeting, before Simon's report comes to us, it would give time to have an opportunity to feed that in and have that fresh in our mind as we come to Simon's report. Might be a good way of handling that. Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in support of the excuse me, recommendation. It's an example of how local knowledge is very helpful in times of emergency. So it's a good report and a good response. And I think part of that success is the staff, local knowledge, local contacts. Thank you.
Sounds like a good argument for keeping the three waters, Councillor Redmond. Okay.
I never mentioned that, Mr. Mayor.
No. Any further speakers? Right, a reply to the mover. Councillor Ward, do you wish to say anything? No. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Excellent. Thanks, Jared. And thanks for representing us on the conversation that I can't be at shortly or could nominate someone else to be at because we're at a council meeting. So thank you for your work there this afternoon. You and Jeff, I think Jeff is going there as well. All right, so we move now to other reports, 8.1, which is the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee. Have we got Kitty coming in? Yes. They had, Jared, just while we're waiting for Kitty to come in, they had predicted not so great weather, so I'm not sure where it's gone, but it's a beautiful day out here today. So is that weather prediction?
Yeah. We are watching the weather. We're not necessarily too much worried about rain in this part of the district, down the Rangiora end, but it is possible with this sort of northwest cycle that we could get a compounding series of events in the Alps that bring up the Waimakariri River. So we're just keeping an eye on that, along with the Environment Canterbury River engineers, and possibly to a lesser extent if some of that spilled into the Lees Valley or in the Kuku River, but that's even less likely. But yeah, we're just keeping an eye on it. But yeah, we can expect it to be windy and a bit.
We've got some terrible wind up here, Mr. Mayor, already.
Okay. And obviously Wendy's got the same. So thank you, Jared, for that update. Kitty, your report 8.1, pages 209 to 229. Thanks, Kitty.
Before I present my report, I'd just like to clarify a couple of points that aren't quite clear. Environment Canterbury doesn't receive any of the waste levy, so any funding they provide would have to be from rates. And they also don't provide any waste services and don't need to develop a waste management plan under the Waste Minimisation Act. They do have responsibility, however, for contaminated land, hazardous waste management, and also managing litter within river boundaries. So there would be benefit to them to being part of the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee and work with staff to look at waste as a whole, which includes the contaminated land and hazardous waste management. So my report gives some background to the formation of the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee, which was formed in 2006, and at that point comprised all local authorities in the Canterbury region plus Environment Canterbury. ECAN provided 25% of the funding, the city funded 50%, and the other councils' funding was based proportionately on population. The total funding pool was $150,000 and the ECAN share was $37,500. When ECAN withdrew from the Joint Committee in 2011, the total funding pool was dropped to $112,000 and the ratios were adjusted for council population changes. Since then, ECAN staff have continued to actively participate in the staff group meetings and they've led some projects. And more recently, we've been discussing the need for a dedicated staff resource who would be able to lead regional collaboration activities, oversee projects the Canterbury Waste Joint Committee fund and report on their progress, and also investigate regional opportunities for investment, for example, into waste diversion infrastructure, in order to leverage regional funding and seek national funding from the Waste Minimisation Fund. The report to the Joint Committee was prepared on the basis that ECAN would accept the proposal to rejoin the committee and to accommodate the staff position with other councils funding the staff's salary. The ECAN funding would therefore be around about $40,000, which is of the same order as the previous funding levels. In order for the committee chair to start the conversation with Environment Canterbury, all councils party to the constituting agreement have to support the recommendation by the Joint Committee, which is to agree to a new staff position being created, agree to increasing the budget to fund that salary, and agree to invite ECAN to rejoin the committee, and implied in that is to host the staff position. Page 213 of the agenda 4.5 outlines the benefits to all councils from the staff position. And note that if ECAN were to rejoin and host the staff position, we do have enough budget in the long-term plan for the increased call on funding. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Kitty. Any questions of Kitty? Some of Councillor Doody, followed by Councillor Bryan.
Just a wee question, Kitty. Why would the staff be placed in Environment Canterbury when it could be in the council, Christchurch City Council?
It was thought, given that it has a regional focus, the regional council is the best place for that staff position. Previously, with the hazardous waste committee that we had back when I first started, that was hosted by Environment Canterbury and run through them. So it was seen as a really good a fit, I suppose, regionally, rather than if they were in Christchurch City, then they may get subsumed into what Christchurch needs.
Councillor Bryan?
Yeah, I was indicating I'd like to move when you be ready.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blackie?
Yeah, just briefly, Kitty. So the position and the money are subject to ECAN coming back in. I'm kind of amazed that the Waste Joint Committee, after how many decades of progress and being there at this stage, have to agree that you need a new staff position to progress waste minimisation. What is going to happen to the situation? Forget the money. What's going to happen to this whole waste minimisation concept if ECAN don't come back in?
That is a very good question, and that would have to go back to the committee to consider in a staff report. And the fallback position could be that Christchurch City Council hosts that staff position. But that again, that would have to go back through the staff group to report back to the joint committee, who would then make recommendations to council.
Okay, further questions? So I have got an indicated mover in Councillor Bryan, seconded by Councillor Barnett. Councillor Bryan, do you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Most of you have heard me talking about how we need to take a more regional approach with regard to waste minimisation, and you've heard me speak about the opportunities that are available, not only with the levy money that comes into Canterbury councils, but also the levy money that is held by government for bigger projects. We need somebody to be looking at the opportunities for these bigger projects, and somebody who can work it. And it's tough to say that the staff group should be able to manage that. So I see this as a real opportunity. And in answer to Councillor Blackie's question, we don't know what the governance team or the governors of ECAN's view are. Obviously staff are interested, but it'll come down to a meeting such as this by ECAN to make a decision whether they want to do it. If, and I hope this doesn't happen, if they decide that, no, this isn't for us and we don't want to do it, at the end of the day, I'm picking because of the importance of a regional approach. It would be unfair to put another 40,000 impost on the city, and we may end up bringing something similar to this back at a future council meeting. I certainly don't want to let this drop. If ECAN, unfortunately, if they said no, I would not like to see this drop. So I hope all colleagues support it. You've heard my views on it before, and it's a very good report. Thank you very much, Kitty.
Thank you. The seconder.
Yes, absolutely agree with everything that Councillor Bryan has said. If we don't get ECAN in the room and around that table, I don't think a regional initiative will succeed, because there's so many parts to waste and waste minimisation, and they're an essential part of that. Our staff are already incredibly busy with the initiatives they have, and it's having an actual dedicated resource to look on a regional basis is essential if we're going to make any progress in waste minimisation realistically. And our community have been asking for it. We're getting more and more people wanting to do the right thing, and we've got to enable facilities and operations that are going to cater to that growing need in our community.
Excellent. Further speakers? Councillor Mealings?
I'd just like to endorse that position as well, that it makes sense to me that our regional council looks after a regional issue. And if you really look at everybody who's sitting in the membership of the working committee, that those are all basically councils that feed into Cape Valley as an example. So it's actually, it behooves all of us to work together to reduce our waste for many reasons, not the least of which that, you know, let's prolong the asset that we've got. And it's obviously the better thing all around for the environment anyway. And having somebody that can actually take a broader view of that makes sense to me. So I'm in support of the recommendation.
I'm going to support the recommendation as well, but I just and support the comments that have been made. But I just particularly want to acknowledge Councillor Bryan, and thank you for your work and expertise in this area and keeping us up to date with where things are going. So thanks, Robbie, for all that you do in this area. It's appreciated. Any further speakers? Councillor Bryan, sorry, Sandra, is that you wanting to speak? Or is it just a thumbs up? Okay. Rather reply, Councillor Bryan.
Just a slight correction, Councillor Mannings. They're not all these ones are with us on Cape Valley. So because you've got Timaru and Mackenzie, they're not. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Kitty. And by the way, Kitty, thanks. I know you and the team are doing a lot through COVID. Keeping the waste stream going and making sure that we have combined messaging across councils so we don't get into that stupid situation that happened last time which cost us all a lot of money. So, and I know that it puts the team under a lot of pressure down at our transfer stations, but like many of us, I'm sure we'll be down to had a good clear out through this period. So I know that it's there's a steady stream coming through. So thanks for what you're doing to keeping it managed for us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we now come to 8.2, which is the Walking and Cycling Network Plan. So I think Don's joining us for this. Don Y, I see Don Wise and Ellie Mace Cochrane's joined, so, and Kieran. So just allow those come through. Hi, Ellie.
Hi, Dan.
Forgot, is it you that's leading this report, Ellie, or is Don?
I'm
Don
starting off,
supporting you?
and then Don might come back in.
Okay, I see Don's there, so coming in. So we'll just wait for him to connect to audio. We've got Kieran as well.
Right, hi guys,
Okay.
I'm here, I think.
Hi, Kieran. How are you? Hi, Don.
Pretty good, thanks.
It's good to see you. I see you on the footpath occasionally going for a run past, so it's good to see you, Don. All right, so Ellie.
Hi, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update to Council on feedback received from the community boards and also seeks approval to consult on the Walking and Cycling Network Plan and associated infrastructure prioritisation program. The report included in the attachments was taken to each of the community boards last month. We received feedback from the Oxford, Ahoka and Wood and Sefton community boards during their meetings, and this has been detailed in this updated report. The recommended option is to approve consultation on all of the proposed routes and prioritisations, as this will enable engagement with both the public and key stakeholders to get their opinions on the proposed plan. Don, if you've got anything to add.
Don, did you have anything you wish to add to the report?
I'm hearing two voices.
One can't help you with the second one, can help you with the first.
I can still hear
sorry, I'm not going to say anything further because it's going to get me in trouble. Did you wish to add anything, Don? You okay?
No, I have nothing further to add. Ellie's done a... Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we can. All right. Well, it sounds like the audio's playing up there for Don. So, so questions. I've got Councillor Barnett. You're on mute.
Right, now I'm not muted, sorry. I'm a bit confused by this report, guys, because in the report below, you have got feedback from the Rangiora Ashley Community Board, but in this report, you haven't. And the map you've got is the old map that you consulted with the boards, but the funding, which is on, sorry, I'm working two computers, this is on page 264 of the agenda. If you look at 264, that reflects the changes that we made in Rangiora Ashley Community Board as far as I'm concerned, but the two reports don't match up. And I'm wondering, what are we passing today?
So you're okay? You're not hearing two of us now, Don?
Yes, I still am. I'm still hearing Kirsten speaking as well. But anyway, the answer is that it may have been the approach that I requested, that we put a covering report over the top of the original reports that went to the boards. So the covering report to the council is the requested recommendation for you to pass.
So where is the map that accompanies that recommendation, Don? Because some of those items were taken out of the map in terms of the prioritisation.
Ali, would you like to speak to that?
What are we consulting on? What map are we consulting
we
on?
still had the same map.
Well,
yes.
My understanding was we were going to remove some of the things out of there after the community board feedback.
Yes, so the maps that are shown are not the prioritisation maps, they're the overall network plan maps. We removed the prioritisation maps just because it was getting too confusing. So we've just put the prioritisations in a table.
So what's going out to the community? Because I'd like to see that before I move it for consultation.
Well, is there a way that the correct map can be emailed through?
Because otherwise, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move a procedural motion that this lays on the table for 1 month.
Well, just hold on before we do that. I think if we just how soon could you email us a copy of the correct map?
Probably today, tomorrow.
Well, it'll.
No, in the next 5 minutes, Ali.
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise, it'll be laying on the table.
Okay.
Maybe if we could just move to the next item, and then we could come back to this. Don, you're leading this, so while you're doing that, Ali, if you could look at, and I'm happy to then call a pause, and we can just consider that at that point. So, if you can get that to. Ellie, have you got all our email addresses or the councillor's email address?
Yeah, I can find them. Yep.
Okay. All right.
I just confirmed, so the maps you're after are the prioritisation maps?
They're the ones that Councillor Barnett asked, which are the correct ones that have come following
the ones that match the funding prioritisation on page 264.
Yeah.
Priority 1, 2, 3, as the where we're going to spend the money, rather than the network map.
Okay. And what we might do, I think, Ellie, is we might do a share screen and go through it together. So I might pause us and come back in for a workshop. I think that might be the best way of handling it rather than emailing it. So when you're ready, if you can get that ready, and then you do a share screen here, and I'll just put us into a workshop for a brief period. Okay, so Don, if we could just move to 8.3, which is Heckerau Road, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Page 267 to 300, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did sort out my two voices thing, as Joanne sent me a quick message saying, I think you've still got your live link on, and I did. So I had one voice from the live link and one voice from this. So apologies for sounding slightly...
You didn't sound any different to us. So it was just what was going on your end. But good that you're sorted.
So Heckerau Road, for those of you, I'm sure you've seen the maps. This is the new development just on the edge of Kaiapoi, is close to the motorway. It's been progressed over a number of years in terms of various consents being awarded for this particular activity. And very just recently, as in the last month or so, 2 further consents have been awarded for this activity, one being a land use consent and one being a subdivision consent. The subdivision consent envisages the creation of some new lots with new boundaries as opposed to what was originally proposed. And as part of that, envisages a road stopping and a road vesting. So the effect of this particular report is to request that we approve the road stopping, and also that we approve the PDA, the private developer agreement.
Excuse me, someone's phone's ringing in the background, so could people that aren't required on, could they just mute? Thank you. Sorry, Don.
It was actually mine, Mr. Mayor.
Not only voices, but we've got phones. Good work.
And so we're asking for approval to stop the road as well as approval for the PDA. The PDA effectively has a number of sections in it. The main primary purpose originally for the PDA was to ensure that we had agreement with the parties and protection for the council in that instance, that should the road be stopped but the road not be vested. Now that's a very unlikely occurrence because we'll be looking to do those 2 things simultaneously. There are 2 potential paths, as I think the report spells out. We could do it through the Public Works Act or the Local Government Act, but either of those pathways allows simultaneous stopping and vesting. However, as you're aware, the stopping of a road is a process that has other parties involved in it. And so the protection here is that if the road stopping did take place, but the road vesting didn't take place, there are some instruments allowed for in the PDA which allow the council to carry out that vesting at some stage in the future. So that is the primary purpose of the PDA, but it also does pick up on a little bit more detail in terms of the intention of the original resource consent to make sure that all parties are very clear on exactly how to interpret the implementation of that resource consent. In addition to that, Mr. Mayor, we also, this has been a very fast moving feast, and there are 2 other clauses which Sheehan, our lawyer, has drafted up for us. And they are really clauses for information only. They don't give effect to any material changes. Now, your recommendation in front of you already allows the adoption of this PDA subject to minor changes. And so I would put these in that category of that. Effectively, what they do is they note that the council is not putting in place additional instruments to protect against the road forming not taking place. So we may well get the road vested, but it may be sometime, or it may never, for instance, get formed if, for instance, the other party goes bankrupt or some other unforeseen event like that. In that instance, the effect of the resource consent cannot be given effect to until the road is formed. So even if it were not formed immediately, nobody is going to build anything further down there until such time as that formation takes place. So it's really just acknowledging that risk is in fact there, but is acceptable because of the resource consent requirements. In addition, there's a second clause which says when that formation does take place, the parties agree that minor boundary adjustments may be required to take into account where the road has actually ended up. And that's, as you'll be well aware, when we do form a road, sometimes the batter slopes go a little bit further than was envisaged. And it may well be that the toe edge of the batter or the toe edge of the drainage ends up slightly outside the road reserve, in which case the parties agree that they will work together to give effect to that. Now, the other parties, the developers, have been verbally spoken to with that, and they are happy with those clauses being added in. So from their perspective, they are comfortable that they're just further explaining the rationale for where we're at with this. So rather than speaking any further, I think I'll just halt there. Rob, I'm not sure if you've got anything further, Rob Hawthorne. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions.
Rob, you're on mute, mate.
Sorry, just standing in for Raymond, who did some of the earlier work on this, but Raymond, as you may be aware, is moving on to the city. So standing in for him here. Probably there are two salient things, and the recommendations leave options open for either progressing the road closure via the Public Works Act or the Local Government Act. And on reviewing these, there are merits to both. Under 1.16 in the summary, there's a small table there that highlights the key elements of that. And the differences are largely around potential timing benefits using the LGA and the public consultation or the lack of it if we use that PWA by comparison with the LGA. There are risks associated with both in terms of reputational risks in relation to Land Information New Zealand and the public in using the Public Works Act, which allows us greater speed but lacks the same level of transparency that is more common. There's a very small potential that you could get a judicial review where an aggrieved party chose to take some action against council and the parties in progressing this. We believe that is very low, and there is still potential for rejection by the Minister in relation to accepting the PWA as a mechanism to progress this. Again, we think that's low, and we've talked through these matters with the developers. They understand those risks and are keen to progress this development in as timely a way as they can, and their preference is to utilise the LGA approach. Both approaches are certainly reasonable and have merit, but it's a little bit of a judgment call between the two. So instead of giving a definitive answer in one direction or other, we thought we would allow some debate around the council table as to what your views were, but we have requested approval for the CE and myself to progress that road closing using one or the other. So really opening that up for your consideration.
Thank you. So questions, I've got Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just further to what Rob has just said, I'm struggling, and my question is around how is there a risk, even if it is low, it's lower than low, given that the people who use the road are the owners of the road. The development is actually being developed by the developers who own the road. Where are these objectionable parties that would stop a road that isn't even used by anybody except the developers that are there now and the people who are going to develop there, who would have to come to that agreement anyway? Why are we even debating that fact when where is the danger from whom on a road that is never used by anybody because there's no one there?
Rob?
Right, in response to that, you've summarised that very well, and that's why we consider that the LGA in this instance is not an unreasonable approach to take. However, the norm in these cases is to go through through the LGA. Sorry, I got those around the wrong way. Is to go through the LGA. It opens it up to wider scrutiny, and if we were to receive objections from a party that was not directly affected, generally council would receive those objections or concerns and give them relatively low weight in making a decision. And the process normally follows that there is some discussion and not negotiation, but working with that party to explain things and hopefully allow them to see that the effect is minimal on them and that the objection is of question. If, however, they maintain their objection, even though they may not be directly affected, the discussion actually can therefore be referred to the Environment Court. So a party can utilise this mechanism to hold up a development by taking that action. The Environment Court, in turn, would consider an objection that really had no impact on that party as being objectionable and throw it out. So there are some process steps that you would go through. It is highly likely that if it were to come back to council with a third-party objector, that council would reject that. So this really goes to the balance of probabilities, and in that respect, progressing this through the PWA is highly likely to go through without any concern or objection, given that the parties that are affected are in fact the developers and owners promoting it. And so we would argue to LINZ and to the Minister that, that the risk here to the public is minimal.
Do you have another question there, Councillor Atkinson?
No, I just found that astonishing and confusing because I don't get it, I'm afraid.
Okay.
It's only them, there's no one else.
Okay. Perhaps a point for debate. Any other questions? Sorry, I had Councillor Stewart. Thank you. Followed by Councillor Redmond.
Thank you. It's a bit tangential to this, but I recall when this zoning was first put in, that once volumes got to several 2005 comes to mind, that there would be traffic lights on the corner with Smith Street. Is this altered in any way by what's going on, or when does that kick in?
This requires those traffic lights to be installed as part of the 224C sign-off for any further development in there. As I mentioned, there is now an amended land use consent has been applied for, which gives very specific if tenants or mentions types of tenants in this area and their effects. And so before those land uses can be given effect to, that road needs to be built and those traffic lights installed.
Thank you.
Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Something I was wondering about were the safety aspects and roading aspects of the exit onto Smith Street near the motorway. I checked that with Joanne, so I just wondered if Don might be able to provide the background of discussions with NZTA and so on that have come up with a solution for that aspect.
Certainly, in terms of the roading design, this development and the solutions that have been put in place has been fully discussed and settled upon with both internal council staff and Waka Kotahi NZTA staff wearing their road safety hat. And so all of the elements that you would normally expect when any development comes in our door, we place a review over it from a road safety perspective and a road asset perspective. We have carried out that activity, and in this instance, of course, because it is so close to the motorway, the NZTA were also required to do that, and they have also given their approval to the final layout and the final solution that has now been designed. The one element that is still yet to be resolved with NZTA, and I think this has also been mentioned in the report, is that there still remains link strips alongside the south side of Smith Street, which have not yet been removed. And so again, the PDA mentions those and indicates that these roads, those link strips need to be removed before those roads. Well, the council needs assurance that the link strips are either removed or will be removed before we allow that road to be opened to the public. We have allowed the or will be removed clause to be in there because we recognise that these things may take quite some time to work through the internal NZTA system, and we wouldn't like to hold up the whole development waiting for that. However, we would like assurance that NZTA were working towards that end goal. But in terms of the road safety, you're quite correct, Councillor Redmond, that this has had full scrutiny of both council staff and NZTA staff.
Okay, further questions? We've got a recommendation. Someone prepared to move? Moved by Councillor Atkinson, seconded by Councillor Blakey. Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this needs to go through. We need to get it underway as quickly as possible. I think we often try to mitigate no risk at all, and in anything we do, that's impossible to do. And I'm an advocate for getting this done as quickly as possible. And when you've got the parties that are in this process are the affected party of the process, then there's no need to use any other system than the quickest way that is there. If someone's going to object, they'll object anyway. But I find it pretty hard to believe that someone's going to object about an internal road that's being done for the developer and for, well, Countdown as it so happens, as well as an agreed party to this, and us, that it makes no difference to us at all whether the road is stopped and where it started, because there is nothing there. It just makes sense to get on and get it done the quickest way possible and actually allow people to get on with the developments in which they want to run. So I'm an advocate for the fastest way possible. And yes, there will be a little risk in that, but the risk is no higher than taking the long road. So I just want to see it go through as quickly as possible. I have no problem with the recommendation. It says, you know, down to the property manager and the chief executive. So that's fine to decide which way, but I'm just advocating for that quickest way possible. It makes absolute sense to me, and let's not get tied up in our own bureaucracy to stop something that's internal for the developers.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey, do you wish to speak?
Thank you. Very briefly, yes, I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, as the report says, we're providing an equivalent or better access, which says it all, really. I'll be, like the other speakers, I'd be very surprised if there's any objections. In fact, I'd go so far as to say anyone objecting to this is just doing so to be mischievous. We've built in some flexibility. The CE and Rob can work around the best scheme. No problem. Let's do it.
Further speakers? Okay, right of reply if you wish, Councillor Atkinson. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes, contrary. I declare that carried. Thanks, Rob and Don. Don, if you can wait, we will just, Ali, come back to you. Jared, you're off, are you? Okay. Well, did you wish to speak, Jared?
Yes. Yes, I wish to speak, please. Just regarding the walking and cycling report, just this morning, the NLTP was released by Waka Kotahi, and we have not received the walking and cycling funding we were anticipating in that. So just given that and the question over the report, I actually do recommend that the report is left to lie on the table, and staff will bring a report back to the next council meeting, which will cover off the question regarding the program, and also we'll be able to update the report to include where we get to with Waka Kotahi in terms of the funding.
So maybe, Jared, you could just advise you're withdrawing the report at this point,
Yes,
and that you
yes.
can come back.
Yep.
We don't need a procedural motion. So
Yeah, that's right.
I'm happy to accept that. It doesn't. I think that's probably where the direction was going to go if we didn't get that. So 8.2 at this point is withdrawn, and we'll come back to a further meeting. So thank you. We now come to 8.4. So thanks. I see Ali thereby. Thanks, Ali, for being present, and Kieran. So that's Vanessa Thompson and Simon Hart. So that's pages 301 to 334. Just as Vanessa's coming on, I'd just like to commend you, Vanessa. I don't think I've ever seen such a complete report that's canvassed every option. So well done.
Oh, that's right. Just
we can't see it. There we are. Yep, great.
Bye.
And Simon, hello. So that we're in your hands.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to conduct a 6-month trial of e-scooter share services in the Waimakariri district. And you'll note from the report, we're proposing that Flamingo Scooters is the partner for council in this instance. We're looking at a trial period of 6 months from October to November through to March, April. There's no sort of operational cost for council involved in this trial. Flamingo Scooters will cover the operational cost to run the trial in terms of the daily activities, and there's no additional cost for council. We have had some pre-engagement with the Waimakariri Access Group, Youth Council and the Age Friendly Waimakariri. There were noted concerns, and we've tried to include those concerns in the geofencing restrictions that you'll see in the report. So you'll note there's geofencing restrictions there from items 4.3 to 4.4, and we've noted there's no-go zone areas, no parking areas, general speed restriction zones and the like, and that just reflects concerns we've had from the community, those with that pre-engagement, staff concerns, things that we wanted to try and mitigate risks around, and I'm sort of happy to take any questions, but before I do, I just want to note the community boards have also supported the trial, and we've factored in their feedback as well in those geofencing restrictions. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Vanessa. Any questions? Councillor Redmond?
Thank you, Vanessa. A very comprehensive report. If I've read it correctly, can William Street between the BNZ and Blackwalls be geofenced?
We can. We opted not to do that just because that connects the north and south of the Kaipoi Town Centre. So we, the BNZ, sorry, just correct me, is the north of the town over the bridge?
South.
Oh, south. Yes, yeah, we can geofence areas like that if that was a desire from council. We're just mindful of geofencing where we need to and in areas where we don't need to, because if we sort of restrict it too much, it's hard to get a really good sense of the trial and how it would actually pan out in the district. So we're hoping to keep most areas open if possible and just see how they go, because we can certainly amend things through that 6 months if a particular area is causing issues or whatever.
Would you agree there are alternatives?
Hold on. Phil, just sorry, Councillor Redmond. Simon, you wish to add to that answer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add on Vanessa's points, this set of operating parameters not only has been run through the community boards who provided their approval, but also was worked in with the Town Centre Implementation Working Group, who worked with us on these parameters. And we had very robust discussion about the geofencing areas, and we did feel with the Kaipoi situation that the connection between the northern part of the town on the north side of the river and the southern part of the town on the south part of the river was quite important, and the access ways across and around those areas were sufficient from which to conduct those activities on the basis, of course, that we can reduce speed and those sorts of things.
Councillor Williams, sorry, Councillor Redmond, sorry.
Thank you. Vanessa, would you agree there are alternative routes to get to the William Street Bridge?
We can certainly look. There are options there. It's just that's the main one, the main thoroughfare in terms of people connecting the north and south of town.
Finally, what guidance does NZTA give to speeds in high-use pedestrian areas?
So you'll remember there was that accessible streets regulatory package that we submitted on last year, which if that comes into effect at some point, I believe they're still assessing it, that would provide some more controls in terms of speed restrictions on footpaths. They were proposing to limit speed limits to 15k as a general wash. So at the moment, I think there's limited controls, hence why that package was put forward with some changes around micromobility and how it's adopted across the country. So yeah, there's limited controls at the moment in terms of guidance from Waka Kotahi.
Okay, so just on geofencing, Councillor Williams, Councillor Redmond, sorry, pardon me, Councillor Williams. I similarly had questions about that, and I was advised by myself that it had been considered by both the Working Party and the Community Board. So the question of geofencing and kaipo, because that was a question we asked when it came to workshop. And secondly, can you just remind me, is the speed, are we planning to reduce the speed in Kaiapoi Town Centre in that particular area?
Yeah, so just on the William Street Bridge, between that main sort of shopping part of town, we were looking at a 15k speed limit in that particular area, and we thought that was an appropriate way to manage the risk initially. And I do want to stress that we can start off, these trials are just, when we start the trial, we can assess things in the first few weeks and certainly change things. So if we find a particular area, these issues in the area we didn't anticipate, we can actually put restrictions in pretty much straight away, as long work with the providers to just resolve that.
Councillor Atkinson and Councillor Ward, I understand, were part of that working party. Did you wish to add, would you like to say something? Because you've been part of this consideration. Would you like to add anything, Councillor Atkinson?
Well, I think
I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor Redmond. Yep.
I think that I'll keep that for the debate, really, because I mean, just to say that it's been through a pretty rigorous process and some pretty hard debate from people sitting around the table, including the staff questioning themselves on things that they had put forward. So it's been pretty well canvassed before it got to this point, you know, about previous actions of previous towns and so on and so on. So you can imagine where it's been, but I'll keep the rest for the debate, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
I just want to say that it has been through very rigorous discussion and options, and Vanessa has put a lot of time and effort into researching all the possibilities and liaisoning with the right ones, and I think she's done a superb job, and really thank her very much. She's put so much effort into it, and time will tell, and we'll see how we go, but I think she's covered all our options to give it the best chance, and we'll be able to see how things pan out during that 6 months, and all will be revealed.
Thank you. Councillor Redmond, did you have another question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Vanessa, referring to the accessible streets package, the information I had was that NZTA were considering a speed limit of 10 k's per hour. Is that something you've considered?
Accessible streets, from my understanding, was 15k as a standard for the streets. However, there would be an option for councils to implement lower speed standards if that was a desire from a local council of either 10 or 5. However, noting that sort of 5k is probably not viable for a commercial provider, that would be something they probably wouldn't be happy about. For us, I guess 15, noting that was going to be the main standard in that package, that's what we've opted to land on, basically. Yeah, I think 10k is quite slow. It's quite. I mean, Simon, you might have some more comments around that, but 10k. I mean, we could certainly look at it, but it is a bit more restrictive.
Well, would you consider 15 k's addresses the concerns of grey power and the other groups you consulted with?
I think it's an appropriate response in terms of what's probably done around the country, in terms of other cities, how they've responded to areas that might be perceived as higher in risk. 15k does appear to be a standard sort of response. So yeah, I would feel that it's appropriate, though we can certainly, if it's a desire of council to reduce that, we could certainly have a conversation with the Flamingo and see how that sits with them.
Simon, did you want to add something?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to reiterate the point Vanessa made a little earlier, that I think it's important that when we start the trial, the parameters provide the opportunity for people to use these scooters in a way that they might feel appropriate. If we put too many limitations on the parameters early up, we don't really get to assess the impact of them as well as we might have. And we always reserve the right to negotiate changed parameters midway through or partway through the trial with the provider, so that if something is becoming hazardous or a problem, we can limit the damage of that through the limitation of the parameters as we go. So whilst these parameters are being recommended by staff in the first instance, we will be monitoring this pretty closely with our colleagues and making sure that parameters are adjusted if indeed we find there are issues.
Okay, Councillor
Barrett. Just a question, I'm not sure who can answer this one, but is there a speed limit restriction on mobility scooters in main streets?
I don't believe there is. Yeah, I don't believe there is.
Thank you.
But I could, yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm sure there isn't. Yeah, I think.
No, I
think
don't
there
think so.
is.
I think you're right, Vanessa. I don't think we have anything like that.
Councillor Atkinson, you had a question?
I was indicating I'll move when you.
Oh, okay, all right. So any further questions? So Councillor Atkinson's indicating he'll move, seconded by Councillor Ward. Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's actually with delight that I move this report and the trial for these scooters. Whilst I get that grey power and access groups have issues with, we'll call them vehicles, they also have issues with lines, colour, and everything else that there is within our community. That is not to belittle any one of those. They are very real, and they are things that happen in our community. Unfortunately, just like all of us, we have to learn to deal with these things. This is a step forward for our community, is actually moving into the real world. We have a lot of students who get around on these things in cities and other areas, and I welcome that. I think that is fantastic that people can get out, get around and do what they need to do. As for Kaipoi's Main Street, we debated this quite long and hard really about whether we should use Kaipoi's Main Street. It is a lot wider than Rangiора's Main Street, and the fact that restricted to 15 kilometres, there's a bridge in the middle of it, so where do you stop? You ride a scooter, let's say, we'll go from the high school, and you have to stop at the main street, walk down the main street, and then if you're lucky, there might be one halfway through the day over the other side of the bridge, which means that you can jump on a scooter and go all the way to Sovereign Palms. Doubt that's going to happen, because the 5 or 6 that are in the middle of the main street that will have been used during the day will be further out in the suburbs somewhere. So the fact that you can actually ride through the main street, pick one up on the outskirts and drive through the main street to get to where you need to go. Look, will there be problems on footpaths? Will there be problems around places? All trials have their issues. And we've been through the danger thing. I've heard people falling off them. I've heard, they've broken their legs and hit their heads, and I'm sick and tired of hearing that. It doesn't matter what you do. If you climb a tree, you can fall out and break your arm. Even at 60 years old, I still climb the odd tree with my grandson. It has never, ever stopped me. And we need to make sure that we move forward into the modern world. I'm actually more than happy to put my face to this when it goes to the community. I have no problem at all in promoting this, and I hope that you will all get on board with something that is really progressive and shows our community to be moving forward.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. Yes, and we have taken into consideration Rangiora and that the safety up the main street. So that's taken into consideration. I think Kaipoi is a little different. So I think there's been lots of debate, lots of consideration, and let's just see how it goes. And I'm sure that Vanessa and Simon will be having a close look at how it starts to operate. And let's hope that there's no more lockdowns and everybody can get out and scooter around and have a wonderful time in our community.
Councillor Mealings.
Yeah, I would just like to say this has been a really well thought out report. You've weighed up the issues really well and presented all the options and come up with, I think, what looks like a really good starting point. It is a trial. It can be modified as needs be if we need to. But I would like to point out that according to my Garmin and all the walks and cycling that I've been doing over lockdown, your average brisk walking pace is 10 kilometers an hour. That's brisk walking. So why would I take a scooter if I can't actually go any faster than I can walk anyhow? An average bike, just, an average, not racing, but bicycle speed is around 15 Ks. So we're not actually putting anything any different on the roads than what we've already got going on now anyhow. So again, the fact that this is a trial and we can modify as needs be once we get it underway, I think it's an exciting thing for us. And I hope you'll support it.
Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would point out that these scooters are to go on the footpath, not on the road. And I've been influenced by the submissions from Grey Power and others, which don't relate to the safety of the scooter operator. I think you take your own chance if you're going to ride one of these devices, but the risk of harm to pedestrians. And if you go online, you can find evidence of horrendous injuries that pedestrians have suffered when hit by scooters. It's a worldwide phenomenon. The risk of harm could be mitigated to a certain degree by the speed limit. And I note that Waka Kotahi say that an e-scooter speed limit of 10K is being considered. They had issues around how enforcement would be carried out, and then say speed is a safety factor for all forms of transport, and e-scooters are no exception. One of the key proposals under consideration to improve e-scooter rider safety and the safety of other footpath users is establishing a maximum speed limit for footpaths, with some ability for councils to adjust this to suit local circumstances. So I tend to think that 15K, when people are dawdling, they're not walking briskly when they're shopping. And I'm talking about high pedestrian access areas. I'm not talking about the Passchendaele cycleway or those sort of areas, but where people are dawdling, they're not expecting to step out of a shop and be taken out by an e-scooter. Now that's the worst case scenario, but it's possible that it could happen. So I do have a concern of the speed limit if we're going to have scooters in high pedestrian shopping areas like the main street of Rangiora High Street, although I think they're excluded from there, but William Street in particular and Kaiapoi. So I'm not all in favour. I'm in favour of the trial, but I'm not in favour of the speed. Thank you.
Just speaking of the report, by the way, Wendy, if you could tell Ian flat white, it'd be nice. Thanks, since he was making a kawhasa in the background. I'm going to support the trial. The report, I think, Vanessa, you've done a really good job. Can I acknowledge the working party who've helped come to this conclusion, both Councillor Atkinson and Councillor Ward, and also our boards that have been involved. Really good to have had the feedback from Grey Power and also the Access Group and our Youth Council particularly too, because it does help us understand what some of the concerns are and where in some of the pros and cons, and so that those things can be considered. And I personally favour a geofence in Rangiora town centre because of the width of the footpaths, and I see it myself, and those of you who use the footpath will understand that too. Just the widths aren't as good as clear and as they are in Kaiapoi, and I would have supported Kaiapoi if that had been a concern from the working party and the community board. But I think the 15k speed limit is reasonable, and as is rightly indicated, this is a trial. We can't prevent scooters from coming anyway, so a trial actually helps us working with others that are going to likely come in the future, and they will. If it's popular, I'm sure others will look to come in any event. In some way of regulating this and understanding how it works, I think makes a lot of sense. I have, as Simon and Vanessa know, have concerns around out the front of our building as the parking location. But I have, in discussing that with them, know that you're going to talk to them about a particular area and marking that area so it's clear, because we've spent a lot of money on both in Rangiora and Kaiapoi on the amenity where our buildings are, and I just don't want to see that sort of these scooters strewn everywhere, and if that can be and some signage that indicates where they park and some clear instructions. And I understand that the provider themselves, they've actually got to take a photograph of where it's been placed, and it's a condition of the money that the charge stopping, and if they don't, the charge continues or they're penalised. So I'm comfortable that how this works. I also support this in the respect that I've seen in Auckland and in other cities around the world when I've travelled, just when it's not well managed, how it ends up being a bit of a problem. In Auckland, when you're up there, you can see them everywhere. So, and just left everywhere too, I might add. Not that we can totally control that, but a trial helps us consider that. So look, I certainly recognise the concerns of Grey Power and the Access Group, but not enough to prevent this from happening. But taking into account their concerns, the geofencing, the speed, and the fact that it's a 6-month trial, I think that's the basis on which I support this, and I know a lot of people will enjoy using them. So it'll be good to see how that goes. So just acknowledge the work of our staff and that, and thank you for a really comprehensive report. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, thank you very much for the report. Again, it covered everything. I think we've canvassed a huge range of views in the community, and there's always going to be those who are for and against. But I'd just like to emphasise some of the reasons why it might be a benefit to us as well. We've all had problems with parking, and it's becoming an increasing issue. I've seen in other cities where people actually park on the periphery and use the scooters to go into the centre. And as we become larger towns, that's actually going to become really important. It facilitates people going into the centre and shopping in different areas rather than parking in one and then driving their car to another one. So the trial is going to tell us where people use it, how it's used, what's going to happen. I had to go into work to get some essential equipment during the lockdown. I came out of the corner of Durham Street and High Street, and I was nearly run down by a person on a mobility scooter. They were travelling very fast around the corner, and I didn't see them when I came around the corner. If we are going to put any sort of speed limits along our main street, I really suggest it needs to be unilateral, needs to cover every type of wheeled vehicle that goes along our main street, because they are dangerous. And if you get hit by a scooter of any sort, it's going to hurt. So what concerns me is I don't want to get a double standard occurring here where we penalise young people using scooters and we allow other people who have mobility scooters to travel at any speed. They need to have some regulation as well if we're going to do that. Having said that, I'm sure Councillor Bryan will say that it's almost impossible to enforce it, especially when they're young people. Enforcement is really, really difficult. And it comes down to the fact that we have to encourage citizenship and people being polite to each other. I know that's maybe a foreign concept in this day and age, but the idea is if you're on a footpath, you give way to other people. It doesn't matter if they're walking or on a scooter or on a mobility scooter. The polite thing to do is give way. And from what I've seen of our residents, most of them are really, really polite. So I actually think it's going to be a huge benefit to have this added means of transport. if we can ever get a walking and cycling path that links Pegasus and Woodend, it'll be a godsend. So that's another thing that we need to really put as a priority. Linking some of our areas that are further apart, Southbrook and Rangiora, it will actually allow for people not to have to make small journeys by car, and that helps our environmental outcomes as well. So I really look forward to the results of the trial. I don't think it's going to be all doom and gloom. We've seen in Selwyn that the results were very positive and they had very little trouble whatsoever. There'll be some minor tweaks needed, and that happens in any trial. But I just would like to see consistency, looking at modern solutions to our modern world, improving our environmental outcomes, and improving accessibility to our town centre for all people. So certainly in favour of this trial and look forward to seeing the results.
Thank you. Further speakers? Councillor Williams, and followed by Councillor Doody.
Yeah, no, I support this trial. I have got a wee bit of, I presume, designated area, for example, by the council chambers there, with signage we paid for by the scooter company, not the ratepayers.
That's a question.
Yes, it is a question for Vanessa.
Excuse me, I'd have to just follow up on that one. Yeah, I would expect that they would pay for that, or if it's a really nominal cost, then we maybe have to find some budget out of it.
Because this here's the recommendation, and there it said no cost to the council for the whole lot. So,
well, yeah, the operation, but there will be some marketing costs for us anyway, which will be mainly for our online channels. Very, very small amount, nominal. But in terms of actually operationally running the trial and the day-to-day stuff, that will be on Flamingo.
So what are we looking? Some people in council say small amounts is a large amount for other people. So
I guess like a couple of hundred or something. It'll be online channels, that sort of thing. That low, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Doody, pardon me.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with seeing this go ahead. I just think this trial would be great, and good luck to everybody that rides on them, because I won't be, but I mean, I see you wouldn't want anybody else not to have that enjoyment. So I will be voting for it.
Further speakers? Right reply, Councillor Atkinson.
Well, look, thank you for the support. I think that this is going to be a great thing. Interestingly, I just had a quick look on Google while that was being debated, and in the last 5 years, 10 people have been killed on mobility scooters, 19 have been seriously injured, and 70 pedestrians have reported near misses from people with mobility scooters. Now, that's not going to be any different. You're compounding the problem by putting scooters where in that environment as well. But Councillor Barnett is absolutely right. If we're going to have a look at speeds and start criticising people for doing things, it needs to be across the board. And some of these very people who are talking about access and being able to be in and out of the criticisms that we're getting, that people shouldn't use scooters. I don't think myself that is fair. The footpath situation, these can be ridden on the road as well. They are not just for the footpath. I can suggest to you that I would be very surprised if most people would be riding the scooters through the main street of Kaiapoi on the footpath. There's a lane there that they can use. They go at 15 k's. My understanding is that the cars through the middle of Kaiapoi go anywhere from 17 kilometres an hour to 22. This could be a very good way of actually keeping the cars back to 15 kilometres an hour by them riding through there. So I think that could actually be a bonus. We need to turn that round and put it on its head. And it may be after the trial that we actually are asking people to put these in the main street in that particular area, down the road, so that can happen, that you can actually keep that to a safer speed. And I think that's the realities of footpaths wherever you are. If it's congested with people, they won't ride down them. 15 k's, I don't know if any of you, well, I know most of you have ridden push bikes, and I know most of you have done a lot of things around things, but trying to ride a scooter at 10 k's or less is actually a lot harder and more dangerous than it is at 15 k's an hour. The slower you go, the harder it is to keep your balance. So you actually need to be making sure that you're maintaining a speed so that you can keep your momentums up. Parking, I think, again, Councillor Barnett's absolutely right. People who will pick them up and park their car further out, catch a scooter in. In fact, Mayor Sam Broughton and myself attended the St Michael's Police Awards ceremony 2 years ago, and we both from ECAN, because we were running short of time, went on scooter from ECAN to St Michael's Church. And I can tell you, it was not only pleasurable, but so simple to do. And the people who fear these things are the people who don't use them. We must remember that years ago, when the horse got a cart behind it, all people did was fear the horse and cart, and that people were going to die through these monstrosities of things.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Atkins, and I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, I declare that carried. Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks, Simon. Good work.
Thank you.
All right, so we're now look, I'm going to keep going until we finish the open agenda, and then we'll break for afternoon tea at that point. So hoping we'd be breaking about 3:30, if that gives an indication. So, but obviously it will depend on debate. Item 9.1, Don, 335 to 345, which is the Capital Works Program update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This hopefully will be quite quick. The only reason this is really on here, referred from the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which considers the quarterly report, is because of the amendment required to tidy up the budgets, which was discussed by Audit and Risk but needs to be approved by the Council. So you'll note here that there was an arithmetic error in an earlier report requesting money to be shuffled around. That money is now being spent accordingly, and this is really just giving effect to what has already happened. There were some questions at Audit and Risk, and they may appear here again, and I'm happy to answer any questions that do come up.
Thank you. Questions? So we've got a recommendation. Sorry, Councillor Blackie.
I can frame it as a question, Don. Page 342, item 10, 10.3. You need to put a comma after the word CAS. It reads North Cass and Community Studios, which is meaningless. It should be North Cass, comma, and Community Studios in Courtenay Esplanade. The reference to North Cass not being a completed project is a very minor main power electrical connection that hasn't been done. So just put a comma after the word Cass, please.
Okay.
In answer to your question, yes, I will.
Question, Councillor Ward. You're going to move. Is there any other questions? To move, Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Mealings. I can see her enthusiastic putting up her hand. Councillor Ward, do you wish to speak?
No, that's fine. It's just a tidy up. And thanks, Don. And yes, no, I don't have anything further to say.
Right. Any further speakers? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Don. 9.2 is actually just for information, so there's no action required. And anyway, we just discussed the other matter just before. So 9.3 is Heritage and Mahinga Kai. So that's Duncan Roxburgh. Duncan's coming out of the waiting room and into the, not going to say the fire, but the meeting. Hi, Duncan.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
We haven't got you visually, but that's no problem. So, oh, we do now. Great to see you, Duncan. Your report, pages 375 to 417. Is there anything you wish to highlight?
Yes. The purpose of the report, look, it was really just to establish those co-governance arrangements for the Heritage and Mahinga Kai area. So we have had a number of briefings with Mahi Tahi Committee. The last one being in April. We were instructed to go away. We spoke to the general manager of the trust, who took a report to them in July, and then subsequently we came back to Mahi Tahi Committee in August with this report. Perhaps if I may just quickly touch on some of the key discussion or possible resolutions or changes made from that meeting.
Are they contained within the recommendations now?
Yeah, so they are in the recommendations in your agenda.
In the summary, yep.
In the summary agenda, yes. So the main one was really around recommendation C. There was a request to remove reference to for Makarini Rupeni, who's the representative from the Runanga on the joint working group. Just remove reference to Environment Canterbury and his title from Environment Canterbury, because he is there as a representative from the Runanga and not ECAN. And based on some of the discussion was had, we also added the word there, or alternate representative as well. Yeah, and sorry, just regarding timing, there was some discussion around timing and the next steps. So the next steps would be that, assuming all goes through today, we would stand up the joint working group as soon as possible, and then come back to council with a report, and hopefully that will be to the next council meeting, with some proposed a proposed draft lease and any amendments as needed to the trust deed. There was a question asked around the likely term of the lease. Suggestion is that would probably be starting with a term of 30 years perhaps, and that was really just to give good certainty to the trust, who are going to take on the co-governance and management of this reserve. They need that long-term certainty before they could commit to that. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Duncan. Any questions? Okay, we've got a recommendation. The moving Councillor Blackie, seconded Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Blackie, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, very briefly. Thank you, Duncan. Good report. Tika Haka have been over this last week and ticked it all off. They're happy. There's one mention in there of the Huria name for the Mahangakai area, with some reference to it not being finalised. That now has been finalised and put to bed. Te Māori has ruled that it will be called the Huria Mahangakai Reserve. Happy to recommend the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson. Further speakers? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, declare that carried. Duncan, thanks for all your work. There's been a lot of work going into this, and been a series of briefings, so colleagues are well over it. So lack of debate's not showing a lack of support. It's just that we've had a lot of conversation over the time. So thank you.
No problem. Pleasure to join you this afternoon.
It's nice to have you here with us. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. We come now to item 10.1, which is the Wellbeing, Health and Safety Report. That's Mr. Harlan, our Chief Executive.
Thank you, Don. I mean, the key point here is that there haven't been any notifiable events, health and safety, in the last month, which is a good result, and that we're deemed to be compliant with our obligations. We do have a new manager in this area, and she's looking to improve our annual safety plan, our wellbeing strategy, refreshing those documents, which is always a good thing. This group has also provided good support to the internal team, giving advice to the organisation around COVID, and they've had a weekly lockdown wellbeing news with emails and tips linking to various websites on how people can, basically keep themselves safe mentally and physically during the COVID environment. So those are probably the key points. Mr. Mears, happy to take questions.
Thanks, Jim. Any questions of Jim? No questions. Someone prepared to move? Moved Councillor Ward, seconded by Councillor Doody. Councillor Ward, do you wish to speak?
I know that's just a great report and really good that there's no issues with a large organisation. So well done.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Doody.
Thank you. Yes, no, good report. It was interesting that a comment was made to me that someone from council had rung up and checked on this particular lady that lives on her own, and she was very grateful. So I don't know who did it, but it was well appreciated. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, unless there's any further speakers, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare it carried. Thank you. So we come to committee minutes for information. So there's a recommendation 11.1 to 11.5 be received for information. Moved Councillor Doody, seconded by Councillor Ward. Just before I put that, is there any questions on any of those committee minutes there? No. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Then we've got community board minutes for information. So it's 12.1 to 12.5 be received. Councillor Barnett's going to move that. I can see her putting her hand up. Seconded by Councillor Doody. Any questions on any of those reports? Do you wish to say anything, Councillor Barnett? Yep.
I just wanted to ask a question about the Rangiora parking strategy. That was raised again at the board meeting, and just wondering when we're going to have some feedback on that. I appreciate it's probably all been delayed with COVID, but it's becoming quite urgent because we're getting a lot of piecemeal parking requests coming to the board.
Not sure on the answer to that particularly, but perhaps Tia, you could just take a note of that. That could be a matter that could come back, but we are next week, we've got a joint meeting with the board on a matter that's to do with the parking buildings. So that's a briefing coming to council next week. So Tia, if you could take note of that and feed that through to Joanne and perhaps Simon Hart around that matter.
I will do so.
So Jim, did you want to say something? Sorry, I just saw you've gone off mute.
Yeah, no, it was just to say what you said, Don, that we can probably pick it up next week at that briefing.
Okay. All right. Okay, so with that, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. We've got no reports for information, no correspondence. So 15 is my diary. There's a recommendation there. Someone prepared to move that. Moved to Councillor Atkinson, seconded Councillor Ward. Do you wish to speak? No. Any questions? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. So we come to portfolio updates, and if we could try and keep it brief, then we'll get to afternoon tea. So just briefly, under iwi relationships, a lot of work's gone in, both staff and certainly from my end and the other colleagues who are part of Mahi Tahi to get the Kaiang and the Honga provisions in the district plan. Really proud of where we've got to on that. It's been a huge piece of work, and acknowledge the work of our staff, and also both Tamari and Tanya. That's recognising 170 years has gone by since we should have done the right thing. There's been some progressive steps, but this will be one of the most progressive that we have, actually having it enshrined in our district plan. Still work to be done, as we know, and still things to resolve, but it's part of a good relationship. So I think the relationship at a iwi level is really strong, and really pleased where that's at, and appreciate all the support of the members that help contribute to that, including our staff. Any questions? Okay, so Greater Christchurch Partnership, Neville or Nikki, do you want to lead that to start with?
I actually wasn't there. I was absent from the last one, Mr. Mayor. Right. So unfortunately, I had a hospital appointment, so unfortunately I wasn't there. So I'll stick out of this one.
Nick, did you want to say anything? So but the main one, we had a briefing on council a couple of weeks back, which was to do with the Urban Growth Partnership. And then there were some updates on the Greater Christchurch 2050 project, and also to do with the passenger transport matters, which had been workshopped and was talking about potential fees and fee structures. There was a workshop there, so it was quite interesting actually, but that'll all come back to council in due course. But I think they're the main matters we discussed. If I missed anything there, Jim or Nikki? Okay.
No, well, other than the Christchurch 2050 and the spatial planning work is getting a bit more of an impetus, particularly the spatial planning work with the two ministers who were down. So I guess the biggest worry I've got is that we do that work, then in 3 or 4 years' time, under the new RMA, whatever it's called, there'll be the Spatial Planning Act, and we'll be doing another one again. So, you know, it's going to keep our planning people busy for a while yet.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Canterbury Water Management Strategy, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Just one item, and you may have seen something this morning, but ECAN has reported back on the Canterbury Water Management Strategy after 10 years. And I must say, I'm incredibly disappointed with what has come out. Of the 10 planks of that strategy, not one has been met. 2 have been partially met, but the rest of them not met at all. So, I mean, and this, the planks are environmental limits not met, ecosystem health and biodiversity not met. The only 2 things like drinking water standards not met, water use efficiency not met, improving natural and regional economic prospects, added value to use of water not met. So seriously, I would like this to be put to the Canterbury Mayoral Forum about where does this strategy go to now. It obviously needs a review in my view, and I'll send you a link to the report, which is Environment Canterbury's own report on its own strategy after this meeting, and also there's a staff article which summarises and gets some comment about it. But after 10 years, to have not one of the major planks of the strategy met in any shape or form, and 2 only 2 partially met as the only results of it, is incredibly disappointing. So to me, as I said, I think it should be on the agenda for the Mayoral Forum about what happens going forward here.
Thanks,
Any questions?
Thanks, Sandra. Any questions of Sandra? I agree with you. I'd like to see a copy of the report and also the staff article. So Tia, if you could get...
It's online. I've got it here. Yeah. I'll send it to you.
It'd be helpful, but I think it would be very useful, Jim, if we can get one of our policy staff to have a look at that and provide a response to us as well. But I would certainly I'll have a read of it, and in terms of the conversation at Mayoral Forum, happy to consider that. So thanks, Sandra. But I would be very useful to have our policy team put their eyes over it and provide some advice back to us. So Tia and Jim, if you can prompt Jim to around that would be helpful.
I choose life, Mr. Mayor, but I will do it.
What's that, sorry?
I choose life, but I will do it.
He's a very nice man. Unless you know something I don't. Anyway, I'll ask you offline. All right, thank you. International relationships, Neville.
Not much at all, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that we have had a letter from Enchi inquiring about our status under lockdown and wishing us all well, and that it won't last too long, and that we're all still alive. So I will make sure that we reply to that in the appropriate manner.
Thank you. Questions of Neville? We've Regen, Councillor Blakey.
Well, yes, I've very little to report, Mr. Mayor. The Little Business Consortium that are interested in putting a flotel on the river came back to us this morning. Now we're sort of out of lockdown, saying, can we move this with all expediency, please? Similarly, Templeton Group this morning came back to us and said, with Pegasus Lake problem, that they're making some serious progress for once, and with their aeration option they're envisaging and are talking to ECAN about consents for that. And that's about all I've got.
Thank you. Questions of Councillor Blakey? No. So climate change and sustainability, Councillor Mealings.
Apologies, before I was losing my headphones. Yeah, so before lockdown, I attended in addition to the TCP, which you covered nicely, I attended the Christchurch City Council's Coastal Hazards Working Group. And yeah, basically they are now at the point where they've got their draft coastal adaptation framework ready to go out to consultation shortly. And they are test driving an online portal which for coastal hazards assessment, which people can like put in an address or an area and select variables like, you know, sea level rise scenario or the year or whatever, and it'll actually show them the effects on their properties or that area, which is quite interesting. It'll be quite a good interactive thing for people, and that would be good for us to have something like that here. And on the 16th, we had the Sustainability Strategy Steering Group meeting, and we had Greg from TKTT and Heather from ENC, and which is really good having them there. Both of them are looking to purchase electric vehicles for their fleets. And ENC, of course, their business awards are now postponed, but that's intended to be a zero waste event using all local produce and all locally grown and produced food, which will be quite neat if they actually get to hold that at some point. And Te Kohaka Tū Kaitara Trust has students out mapping wetlands and with a view to gradual replacement of their pines in the future. And they want to grow and harvest natives like totara in the future, which is quite cool. They've got a new visitor center building pending, and that's probably that for them. And the staff travel survey, about 40% of the staff have responded saying that they'd be interested in investigating a rideshare scheme as a priority. So yeah, we'll see where they get with that. And just behind the scenes, basically with the climate change sustainability response, the national policy is still in a state of flux, really, with the Ministry for Environment guidance due this month, and we're just basically waiting on that. There's a few things we can do, but by and large, we're in a holding pattern like everybody and everything else. So that's it from me.
Thank you. Any questions of Councillor Mealings? Business promotion and town centres, Councillor Ward.
Just a few things. Of course, the business awards have been postponed, possibly to November the 17th or 18th, but we'll be advised soon. I think that's going to be during the week. Another thing that's been postponed is the Waimakariri District Chapter 86 Squadron Chapter Day, which is a new date, which is coming possibly October the 31st, subject to Mayor Dan fitting in with that. And we had a catch up with the Joint Promotions Association, and I got to meet Dani and Peter Riley, the new contacts for Oxford Promotions. They're a really lovely couple, and I'm sure that they will contribute greatly to the smooth running and the positiveness for Oxford Promotions going forward. So it was nice to meet them, albeit on Zoom. And Enterprise North Canterbury, checking in with Heather, she said that with this lockdown that we've just had, that most businesses haven't needed support this time. There was only quite a few inquiries of it that needed assistance. So I think they've done a really good job of supporting people last time, and most people knew what what avenues they could take to get support to get through this lockdown. So she was quite happy that it wasn't too busy in that avenue. So that's really all from me.
Thank you. Thanks, Joan. Any questions? By the way, just on that point, I have said that the 31st is fine with me. So that's for number 88 squadron. That's their street parade. But that'll be dependent on obviously where we're at, levels, etc. But it's a wee way away, so hopefully it will be okay. All right. So with that, I've got no questions, no urgent general business. We've got a recommendation there about moving to public excluded. So is someone prepared to move the recommendation there? Moved by Councillor Blackie, seconded by Councillor Doody. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.